All right. Well, thank you all for joining me for the second Capstone Project Spotlight. It's aptly titled Freedom, Representation, and the Future. If you missed this morning session, Haley Baker and Jay Soglo explored different approaches to unpacking the rise in book bans. Tara Jacoby shared her research on the considerations surrounding AI as an author. And finally, Violet Lane Ruckman shared her research on visual representations of underrepresented groups on young adult book covers. Again, for those students of mine that are joining us, I think it's no surprise that I have another quote from Nelson Mandela: "Action without vision is only passing time. Vision without action is merely daydreaming, but vision with action can change the world." This afternoon, we'll be continuing our discussion on book bans with a particular focus on LGBTQA plus literature. Additionally, you'll hear a really engaging presentation about diversity of faith in publishing. And finally, we will wrap it up with a discussion about the ethical issues of our good friend, ChatGPT. It's my pleasure to introduce you to this afternoon's panel. Alyssa Dearborn is a writer and freelance editor from Syracuse, New York. She is also a graduate of the George Washington University's Master's in Publishing program in cohort 18.5. She's expected to graduate in spring of 2025. Liz Gillispie is one of 8 children and grew up raising chickens and riding horses. Liz calls life in a family of 10 a party and says her siblings are her best friends. She studied journalism and music at Brigham Young University and has since developed a passion for editing, health and wellness, and nutrient-dense cooking. Liz is currently in her second year of GW's publishing program. Both Liz and her husband, Jimmy, are pursuing graduate degrees right now while attempting to balance life with 3 vivacious young kiddos. They have lived in Ohio, Utah, Arizona, California, Texas, and Malaysia. I don't suspect that's all at the same time, but they currently reside in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Tia Gracey is a promising academic and member of cohort 17, set to graduate in fall of 2023 with her second master's degree. With a diverse educational background, including a previous master's in liberal arts with a certificate in writing for children and young adults, Tia brings a unique perspective to her exploration of the publishing world. As she nears the culmination of her studies, Tia looks forward to sharing her insights and engaging in meaningful discussions with fellow scholars and industry professionals at this conference and beyond. I ask you all to please submit your questions. We will open up for discussions following Tia's presentation. And now I will turn it over to Alyssa.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Dearborn, and I am finishing up my first full year in GW's Publishing Master's Program. Today, I'll be talking to you about my ethics capstone project, publishers' commitment to the LGBTQIA plus community in the time of book bans. So when I decided to research the increase of challenging and banning of LGBTQIA plus books, I not only chose to do so because I was interested in how the publishing industry would be affected, I was also interested in how people like me would be impacted. I didn't come out until I was an adult, but even before I officially came out, seeing queer representation in the media I consumed, including and especially books, was important to me. Reading books by and about fellow queer people made me feel seen and that queer stories mattered. Being able to see yourself in the books you read is important. So this project represented the intersection of my professional and my personal lives because we deserve to see queer joy, sorrow, and reality in our books. And publishers should not be punished for publishing those stories. Though not the main focus of my paper, I did want to acknowledge that the censorship of queer media in America is not a new phenomenon. In the past, people who published and distributed so-called obscene works could be charged with a crime and sometimes face dire consequences. In 1927, Jewish Polish activist and writer Eve Adams was deported for disorderly conduct and for distributing her self-published work, Lesbian Love. And more famously, in 1957, U.S. Customs officials seized copies of Allen Ginsberg's collection of poetry, Howl and Other Poems. And decades later, in 2004, Alabama introduced a bill called for all works written by gay authors or featuring gay characters to be banned from public schools. An Alabama state representative at the time said about the bill that he looked at it as protecting the hearts and souls and minds of our children. This reasoning is almost an echo of the reasons people are targeting LGBTQIA plus books today. Since 2020, the prevalence of challenging and banning queer books has become more commonplace in both grassroots and legislative efforts. Since the last updated statistics in 2022, nearly half of the filings, at 43%, targeted titles with LGBTQIA plus characters or themes. The top reason for challenging of these books was due to sexual content at 61%. Some of the filings explicitly stated that they wanted the text pulled because they depicted lesbian, gay, queer, bisexual, transgender, or non-binary lives. In PEN America's annual index of school book bans, in the 2022 to 2023 school year, there have been 1,477 instances of individual books banned, affecting over 800 titles. In that index, it is shown that there is a significant overlap between books challenged for sexual content and those challenged for LGBTQIA plus content. Equating the LGBTQIA plus experience with only the sexual not only does a disservice to the people trying to tell their stories in published works, but it also does a disservice to readers, both young and old, who just want to see themselves represented in the books that they read. But this targeting of queer books not only affects readers and the queer community at large, it also negatively impacts the publishing industry. Tennessee Senate Bill 1059 or House Bill 841, passed in April of 2023, will arguably impact the industry the most. The bill states that it is unlawful for a book publisher, distributor, or seller to knowingly sell or distribute obscene matter to a public school serving any of the grades kindergarten through 12, making violation a Class E felony. The law defines obscene materials as those that anyone applying contemporary community standards would find appeals to the prurient interests or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct, and taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. This law, like others in other states, or like others before it, use vague language to make words such as obscene or explicit malleable and applicable to a variety of cases. In many cases, as seen in PEN America's report, these words are often used to describe stories of queer people. Like SB 1059, or laws like SB 1059, are not meant to address obscene materials, as distributing obscene materials to minors is already a federal crime. But through vague language and a lack of definition to words like obscene or explicit, it can be easier for book challengers to ban queer books and punish publishers in the process. By directly targeting publishers, book challengers are attempting to intimidate by creating a financial incentive to publish and distribute less diverse books. Despite the increased passing of restrictive laws, some publishers are choosing to fight back. Penguin Random House and PEN America, along with parents and authors, have filed a lawsuit against a Florida county claiming that the county's public schools book bans are unconstitutional. Specifically, the suit alleged that publishers and authors' First Amendment rights are being violated and that the county is in violation of the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. In addition, not all laws relative to book bans are in favor of censorship. In June of 2023, the state of Illinois became the first state to ban book banning. Illinois' Bill 27989 not only bans the removal of books from schools and libraries, it also takes away state funding from libraries that remove books due to political opinion. When addressing the moral dilemmas for publishers, I wanted to acknowledge that although there are ethical considerations, there are also financial considerations that should not be ignored. Publishers are businesses that should support and stand by their missions, but they are also businesses that need to make money to stay in business. If a publisher goes out of business due to the financial costs of a lawsuit, then those publishers will be unable to publish diverse books. It is also important to recognize that the threats of fines and prison time proposed by some of these laws are a real threat to small publishers and distributors. However, if a publisher chooses to comply with censorship laws, the publisher risks not supporting its mission statement, its diversity statement, or even its own authors and catalog. Choosing not to publish certain works due to political pressure is of itself its own form of censorship. And this type of compliance perpetrates harm against the LGBTQIA plus community. When people, especially young people, do not see people like themselves represented in books and media, that can lead to a sense of shame or even a disconnect from community. Publishers can do their part in further normalizing queer life by continuing to publish and support diverse voices. By choosing not to support their queer authors, publishers will have to reckon with the effects of not publishing voices that have been historically under and even misrepresented. In this project, I created indexes of current censorship laws passed that are active in the United States, as well as current lawsuits concerning book bans and censorship. When researching these laws, all which are at the state level, I saw that most of these laws target schools and libraries. Although not directly targeting the publishers of queer books, there are indirect impacts that should concern publishers, such as the perceived perception of the books that they publish. Because of this, I included any law that mentions the restriction or censorship of materials, whether or not the publishers are the main target. Like other aspects of this project, I do plan to add to these indexes as time goes on. When looking at the future of my project, I hope to take the statistics and hard realities discussed in my report and humanize the entire project. It is important to recognize that nearly half of the challenged and banned books are by and about LGBTQIA plus people, but I think it's even more important to understand how the people behind those books and the people who read those books are impacted. Now that I understand how the publishing industry is impacted, my next goal for this project is to learn more about how the LGBTQIA plus community as a whole is impacted by these book bans. I will eventually do this by collecting personal narratives from those in and outside of the industry, and by conducting a survey specifically for LGBTQI plus readers. This survey will address individuals' perceptions about books, identity, how safe and represented they feel in society, and when they first saw themselves in a book or in another piece of media. I will also include my own personal narrative surrounding my relationship to identity and literature. Just as my project started as an intersection of the professional and the personal, I want the next steps in this project to emphasize the personal that cannot be separated from the professional lives of LGBTQIA plus people. I am hoping that by my continuing work on this project will bring more attention to the importance of queer representation in books and help others understand why book banning is a threat to publishers and the entire LGBTQIA plus community. To conclude, publishers will always publish books, whether they choose to comply with the threats of book banners or to fight censorship. The ethical dilemma lies in the choice to stand by freedom of expression and the value of diverse voices, or to comply with the demands of censors. The choices that publishers make in the fight against book bans will determine whether or not a company is an ally to the LGBTQIA plus community. If you are interested in providing any feedback or even sharing your own story or experience about banned books or identity, please feel free to email me at the email that I have on my slide. I would love to hear from you.
Okay. All right, so I'm glad to be here.
As mentioned, my name is Liz Gillispie, and I'm a second-year student at George Washington University in GW's publishing program. This program has been an incredible experience for me, and I encourage any attending this conference who may be considering enrollment to apply. My email address is included at the end of the presentation, so I'd love for any with questions to reach out and connect. I would love to chat about that or any of the things I'll share today with those interested. So this presentation that I'm sharing today has drastically evolved since its inception, and I hope that you'll follow me on my student journey for a few minutes with an open mind as I discuss how my journey preparing for this presentation took me from religion to faith to spirituality as it pertains to the workplace and in the publishing industry as a whole. You can go to slide 2. Thanks. So I'd like to start out today's discussion by illustrating to you the very overly simplified paths of two people as it relates to religion. Number 1, myself, Liz, and number 2, a colleague and friend in the publishing program at GW. And I'll do this by considering some of the, again, overly simplified background, experiences, and thought of each of us as they pertain to religion. So first, let's meet Liz. Liz grew up in a large Christian family and moved often. Liz consistently attended the LDS church with her family and was taught its principles every day at home. Though this religion was strictly observed at home, Liz had very positive experiences and made the choice to continue to express her spirituality through the LDS faith. Liz often feels isolated from academic and professional discussion when religion either goes undiscussed or is discussed negatively. She feels hesitant to express herself in the name of her religion. What is the result? Individuals and groups in academia and the workplace fail to openly discuss religion in an effort to honor boundaries set surrounding religion. Okay, next slide, please. So next, let's meet Taylor. Taylor grew up in a small, predominantly religious town where Christian religion was widely practiced and strongly promoted in both their family and the community. Taylor made the choice to express their spirituality through a different belief system, and Taylor experienced discrimination from others. Taylor, though extremely passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion, feels cautious about religion and where it creeps in. And what is the result? Individuals and groups in academia and the workplace fail to openly discuss religion in an effort to honor boundaries set surrounding religion. Note how both paths result in the exact same results. So let's dig a little deeper as to why individuals and groups care so much about honoring these boundaries set surrounding religion. Next slide, please. History has shown us that religion can be incredibly dicey, and I imagine most here who are well-versed in historic literature would call this a drastic understatement. This frankly painful past for so many has created what I call the religion pendulum swing. The negative encroachment of religion took and is still taking in parts of the world its toll upon many governments, cultures, and people as the pendulum swung wildly in one direction. I will share a few quotes that illustrate this negative sentiment that so many have felt and continue to feel about religion. Countries that are intensely religious are typically less innovative than those who aren't. Our wretched species is so made that those who walk on the well-trodden path always throw stones at those who are showing a new road. Then, with the Enlightenment period and the growing freedom to express new ideas and branch out in belief, the acceptance or tolerance, if you will, of religion over time has swung wildly to the other side in many parts of the world. In America, as with other places, this resulted in a needed separation of church and state, which rightfully led to a wide-scale look at do's and don'ts of religious practice. As the pendulum has continued to swing out over the years, many who practice religion and belief have suffered. Why? Why does anyone who desires to live something that they see as a vital part of who they are, but feel they can't suffer? Next slide, please. Many of our society's great problems flow from people not feeling seen and known. There is a core trait that we all have to get better at, and that is the trait of seeing each other deeply and being deeply seen. So, what are just a few reasons as to why people do not feel seen? This could be a feeling of lack of recognition. This could be that they feel judgment, discrimination. This could be that they sense ignorance from other people or that they don't feel heard, which I would say is closely related to not feeling seen. Next slide, please. What I would like to suggest today to you, to the publishing industry, and to the global workplace at large is a new, more inclusive framework in considering what it means to be more diverse, more inclusive, and more equitable. What our world needs right now is a more holistic approach to diversity. To truly understand a person, and if we ever want to reach a point where we can rationally, productively reason together, we have to establish personal context with one another. How do we do that? First, we gather personal context through background. This includes, but is certainly not limited to, where a person is from, where a person is raised, gender, race, culture, sexuality, and spirituality. Next, we gather personal context through experience. This includes, but is certainly not limited to, the experiences that are lived and that happen to individuals as a result of background. And third, we gather personal context through thought. This includes, but is certainly not limited to, the perspectives and opinions that individuals have as a result of their background and experiences. Now, going back to Taylor, I felt strongly that I should call Taylor in preparation for this presentation. And I will be honest, I thought it odd that Taylor came to mind for this, because I know that Taylor's experiences regarding religion have been very different from my own. As the phone rang and I waited for Taylor to pick up, I thought, what am I going to say? Here I am asking for Taylor's help on a presentation about religion, faith, spirituality. I don't even know where Taylor is coming from. All I know is that we have very different views. And then the thought came, get to know her. As I got to know Taylor, our conversation subconsciously followed this natural framework. By the time I gathered enough personal context surrounding the topic I wished to openly discuss, we were ready. Our hearts had connected and reached a place where we could not just exchange ideas, but collaborate ideas. And what followed was one of the most invigorating conversations I've ever had. Next slide, please. Now, in regards to my presentation, our topic at hand was religion. Through the conversation, we went from the word religion to faith to spirituality, and I'll show you where we arrived. I'll do so by walking you through some definitions as defined by the Oxford Dictionary and as defined by Taylor, my classmate. Religion is the belief in and worship of a superhuman power or power, especially a god or gods, a particular system of faith or worship, a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance. Faith might be described as complete trust or confidence in someone or something, a strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion. Spirituality could be defined as the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul, as opposed to material or physical things. Taylor described it as when you resonate or feel a connection with something greater than yourself. As it pertains to the workplace, spirituality means forming deep connections with others and cultivating something wonderful within yourself and those connections that you would not be able to cultivate within your own isolated self. When we were talking about religion, there was clear dissonance, and we were not in a place where we could openly collaborate. When we changed the word to faith, things became a little more clear for us, and we were getting closer. Once we came upon the word spirituality, that was a place where we could connect. The word spirituality and all it entails seemed to bring to us a place, an understanding, an umbrella whereby we could speak the same language. As we talked about spirituality, Taylor rhetorically posed the question, what do you resonate with? And I would ask all tuned in today to ask themselves the same question. What do you resonate with? How do you express yourself spiritually? Is it through a religion? Is it through faith or some other belief system? In what way do you connect with others and yourself deeply and cultivate something wonderful within those connections that you alone would not be able to cultivate? This is spirituality. And whether it is expressed in the name of religion, faith, or some other belief system or practice, it all falls under this all-encompassing umbrella called spirituality. If we continue to focus on the do's and don'ts of religious practice in academia and in the workplace and at large, we will miss the mark. We will miss out on this massive, vitally important piece that makes up what and who a person is, all in the name of carefully tiptoeing around the old framework under the name of religion. The word religion frankly does not the word religion frankly is not as encompassing a word as spirituality. And if we are truly concerned about diverse thought and inclusion, we've got to shift to this more holistic approach and framework. Now, I'm not suggesting that we explicitly remove the term religion from legal and workplace terminology in the name of being politically correct. What I am suggesting is that at an industry-wide level, we reshape our understanding of the commonly used term religion to now fall under the larger umbrella of spirituality as just one of many conduits in which an individual may choose to live out his or her spirituality. Next slide, please. These statements, every person empowered to be themselves and to share their perspectives, promoting industry and company initiatives that represent people of all ethnicities, races, genders, gender identities, sexual orientations, age, class, religion, national origin, ability, unique perspectives, promoting tolerance and understanding in the workplace, respecting and embracing the unique backgrounds, perspective, experience, and talents of individuals. These statements make clear the urgent need for and the prioritization of individuals bringing their diversity of background, experience, and thought to the workplace. This results in a more colorful, collaborative world. However, in my online searches through these mainstream publishing houses' websites, I struggled to find the policies, content, and featured literature to support such sentiments in regards to religion, beyond the traditional discrimination statements listing on the basis of religion to legally cover their bases. So when we say religion, what are we actually talking about? Is faith and spirituality a subset of religion? Or are faith and religion a subset of spirituality? This innate pull to connect with something beyond or outside of ourselves. Would the term spirituality in DEI statements across the publishing industry better encompass the belief systems of arguably everyone who agrees that spirituality is a vital resource? My proposal here is not that we need more religion in the publishing industry. It is that we need more spirituality. If we honestly expect to foster an environment of value, of tolerance, of a place where people are empowered to be themselves and share their perspectives, we need more promotion and inclusion of spirituality. Next slide, please. Now, this model demonstrates the industry-wide result that can take place if we, number one, take time for personal context. And we do that by gathering background, experience, and thought regarding a person. And number two, if we promote an understanding of spirituality and its vital importance in more fully encompassing efforts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now let's meet Taylor and Liz. Taylor and Liz are both raised in primarily religious communities and homes. Liz experiences positive reinforcement surrounding her religion. Taylor experiences isolation and judgment. Liz and Taylor take time to understand the personal context of one another, which allows them to openly discuss their thoughts regarding spirituality in a safe environment. And what is the result? Individuals and groups in academia and the workplace are open to discuss spirituality as a means of enhancing collaboration and DEI efforts. Next slide, please. These words came to me as I prepared for this presentation. Clarity of mind and body facilitates clarity of thought and spirit. So call it soul, call it spirit. Virtually everyone can agree that our bodies have spirit, that we are hopefully striving to facilitate a mind and a body that can connect through thought and spirit with something beyond or outside of ourselves, something that enhances our experience on this earth. Going back to both the Oxford Dictionary and Taylor's suggestion of what spirituality might mean, a connection of something greater than self, forming deep connections with others and cultivating something wonderful within these connections that you couldn't do on your own, concern for the human spirit or soul. Going back to these definitions, doesn't spirituality seem to encompass a much deeper connection that we are not allowing ourselves in the workplace to tap into? I do find it important to note here, and as Taylor and I noted in our collaborative discussion, that spirituality will change and should change and evolve for people. And that this spirituality is largely shaped by the experiences we have with other people. So why would we preclude such a vital resource of personal development and expression from the workplace? Now, I'd like to point out that there is a stark difference between exchanging and collaborating. If you need an experience of what an exchange of ideas might look like, simply tune in to virtually any news media outlet out there, and you will quickly get a sense of what I mean. I would like to suggest that a goal within the publishing industry ought not to be simply an exchange of ideas. No, I would hope that we, as writers, as editors, as designers, as investors, as distributors, as mentors in the field, whatever your role may be, that we aim for a collaboration of ideas. Next slide, please. Embracing spirituality as part of the conversation will greatly enhance the diversity of background, experience, and thought in publishing. Next slide, please. I'd like to give a massive thanks to my colleague and classmate, Taylor, for her drive to give every voice representation, for her open-mindedness, and for her collaboration with me in this presentation. When I finished my hour-long phone call with Taylor, the thought came, I think I've just made a friend for life. I hope that all of you can experience the same rich exchange of background, experience, and thought as Taylor and I did when we, number one, took time to understand the personal context of one another. And number two, connected deeply through our spirituality. I believe that taking time for personal context and including spirituality in the discussion of diversity, equity, and inclusion will greatly enhance the publishing industry. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gracey. So I did my presentation on ChatGPT, as we are all very familiar with at this point. So I wanted to look at the ethical issues of ChatGPT. And to start off with, I thought that the best way for me to do that was to actually look at ChatGPT. I know that a lot of people, especially in publishing, don't condone ChatGPT, and that makes 100% sense. Like I personally don't think ChatGPT should be used in the publishing industry, and I think a lot of professional publishers agree with me. But in order for me to be able to look at accurately the ethical issues of ChatGPT and what I think can happen from it, what I think may happen from it, and what we can try and do to combat that, I had to actually look and use ChatGPT. So ChatGPT has a lot of capabilities. I'm specifically looking here at for like writing and publishing and what it can help you do, but it's not solely limited to publishing. It can be used to help find a recipe. It can be used to, if you put in hundreds of lines of code and you have 3 errors, it can find those 3 errors for you. If you need to work out a mathematical equation that you don't understand and you can't figure out how, it can help you with that. But for writing and publishing specifically, it can give you essay ideas. You know, if you're given a prompt and you're like, okay, this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to use, it can give you essay ideas. It can help you come up with outlines for this essay. It can help you finding sources. It can give you a sample essay, which is the biggest issue that we have with it. And then it can help you with editing. So in order for me to fully just kind of go through it, this is the framework that I have been working with and that I have been looking at for ChatGPT. So how do I think that this will affect publishing? Tara had talked about this earlier, looking at authorship and whether ChatGPT can be an author or not. I'm going to go into this later, but it fully depends on whether people think ChatGPT contributes enough to actually be named as an author. We can see on Amazon now, people are putting out books that have ChatGPT listed as an author. And so it's started to come out that ChatGPT is now considered an author. And so authorship is now being looked at in the definition of authorship and what an author actually is. It's also affecting labor because, you know, people are looking at it like, okay, you know, we have ChatGPT, which can do all of this writing for us. Why do we have to do it? Why are we doing it? And it's mostly people that I've seen outside of the industry that are looking at it that way. But the less writing that authors have to do, the less their workload, but overall it produces more errors because ChatGPT is a basic algorithm. It takes an input, you're giving it an input, it's taking information from the internet, supplying it, creating it, and then giving you that output. So with the amount of errors that are on the internet, errors are going to be everywhere in your output. Jobs. So I understand that companies need to make money in order to survive. That's a basic point. And so one thing that publishing companies can do, and companies overall can do, is, you know, they may decide to use ChatGPT more frequently instead of having actual editors go through, because there are probably, well, not probably, but there could be errors either way, because human error is a thing, it exists. But I feel like it's less so than ChatGPT, and for a lot of reasons. ChatGPT is an AI that learns from humans, right? It learns from looking at the internet and looking at what we have supplied for ChatGPT to learn. But if humans no longer supply that information, then ChatGPT gets to the point where ChatGPT is just learning from itself, which isn't actually learning. And so I think using ChatGPT to start writing is going to create more errors for writing in the future. And I don't think that getting rid of jobs, though I understand with the economy at the moment is appealing, is not the best decision. So I wanted to take a look at authorship. Why do I think ChatGPT can or cannot be an author? I want to preface this by saying I don't think ChatGPT can be an author. It does not make sense to me. And the reason being that ChatGPT cannot take responsibility. It is an AI program that was created by humans. It cannot take responsibility for any faults in the paper. It can't retract any information. It can't put out a statement saying that it was wrong. There is no way for ChatGPT itself to take any kind of responsibility. And everything would have to fall onto the author. So if we're looking at it from that perspective, if ChatGPT can't take responsibility for any of the information that it puts out, how is it considered an author, right? So that is one thing. Two, it can't create the ideas. Like I said, ChatGPT is an algorithm. You give it the input, and it takes information from the internet that is already provided. But and then it gives you the output, but it can't create that initial idea. It can help you along the way, but it can't start that initial thing. And in order for us to start that, that is an inherently human thing. We have to be the ones to come up with. ChatGPT can't do that. It can take inspiration from things that have already been written, as humans do, but it can't create something wholly original, which is one of the big issues that is going on now. As you guys probably know, there are a bunch of lawsuits that are coming out. Most of the lawsuits are from what I've seen, are news people, and just people that are out there in the public, because ChatGPT will be taking information that is biased and will have defamation in it, and then people will publish that, making it defamation. So there are lawsuits on that. And then recently, I think within the last month, there has been a lawsuit with 17 big authors going in, I believe, on a class action lawsuit against ChatGPT because it's stealing their copyrighted work. Because it's taking this work and it's using it in its algorithm to create this output that people are asking for, it can't create ideas, which is the entire reason behind these lawsuits. And then finally, it can't differentiate between good and bad information. People are only able to do that through education and through books that have already been produced. And if that information is then challenged, then it is published. Then you have more things coming out and challenging it and challenging this way of thinking. But ChatGPT, once it's published, ChatGPT just kind of takes that information. It can't sort through it and determine, okay, this is false, this is false, this is true, this is false, this is true. It can't do that on its own. So because we humans are able to do that and able to look at the information that we have been provided in the past and are able to look at current information and to analyze that, I don't think ChatGPT can and should be considered an author. So where does that leave us, right? So if ChatGPT can't be considered an author, what happens if it is? What happens if people are putting ChatGPT as an author, which is already happening on some of their books? Do we stop at other AI programs? Grammarly is another AI program. I know a lot of people in writing and in the publishing industry know Grammarly and use Grammarly to help them with their papers and to help them edit. Does that have to be considered an author? And then, one of the other examples that I frequently use is for NASA. NASA, they have to put in the information that they get about, a planet. And if they're looking for the correct path, their computer program will spit out hundreds of different paths that the planet could take, but they have to be able to the ones to determine which path it's taking. But is the computer, that the program that's finding those paths and determining, like, these are all of the possible ones, does that have to be cited? Where do we stop if we start considering ChatGPT an author? And that is a line that I haven't been able to find, because this is a very gray area. This is very gray space. And I don't think starting to consider ChatGPT an author is something, I don't think it's a road we should go down. And then possible actions from this. So we can develop software to determine whether a paper has used ChatGPT or was created by ChatGPT. We've already seen some of these softwares come out, but because ChatGPT has only been released November of 22, that's been less than a year. And it's has substantial impact on the publishing world, the editing world, and again, is in several lawsuits, which is fascinating. But these software are not up to date. They're not good enough. They're being used by, some professors, some universities, probably some publishing companies as well. But because the software is not at a place where it can accurately be used, I don't think it should be until it is actually good enough to determine, because that it has consequences for people that aren't using it. And if you aren't using ChatGPT and your article or your paper gets flagged for using ChatGPT, how do you defend that you didn't use it? Changing the rules. This is probably on more like a company level or an association level, is to, more of an honor system is to state, like, if you're submitting papers to our organization or to our publishing company and want to get it published, like, you doing this, you verify that you have not used ChatGPT for A, B, and C. Some companies may be able to be like, oh, it's okay if you use it just to edit. Oh, it's okay if you use it just to find some sources. But I think that may be determined on a company or association basis. You can already kind of see this. One of my coworkers has sent me a link to a publishing company that has started defining what an author is in order to try and combat some of what ChatGPT is doing and what it's been producing. Removing false information. I would love if we could remove false information from the internet, because it's everywhere. It floods the internet. People are able to say whatever they say. Well, not whatever they say, but they can say mostly whatever they want, without many repercussions. And I would love if we could get rid of some of the false information on the internet, but because that's just such a wide scale to be able to try and combat, I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's something we would be able to do. And it's really unfortunate, but it's not realistic. And then update copyright laws. I know that copyright laws, any law pretty much, has been created to try and think about the future. And I don't know that copyright laws have fully, when they were created, I don't think they fully thought of the scale of what technology could do. And so maybe it's to look at copyright laws to see if we can protect it further from AI technology, stating that, this cannot be used within an AI database, which it's confusing that it has to be stated in the first place, but until these lawsuits are completely done, and I think once these lawsuits are done, it may hinder ChatGPT from stealing copywritten work and articles, then we just have to wait or update the laws sooner, which is really unfortunate. But I couldn't think of what else really it could do. But this is only in the scale of really publishing or anything that has copyright, which could be music, movies. But I also think ChatGPT is going to affect the world on a bigger scale. One of the things that I've been looking at is it's impacting our world academically. I mentioned that a few times, but it's starting to be used by students because they are in classes that they don't care about. And so most of the time I find that if you don't care about something, you're not going to put in the effort, because you don't have any interest in it. You're just doing it to get the grade. And I'm curious to see whether or not it's really going to impact the academic world, and see whether it's going to change if we do it on a grading scale, or if we limit how many required classes students have to take. You'll often hear them talking about, oh, I'm just taking this to fill out my requirements. And I'm interested to see if that changes and to see if that cuts down so that, you know, people start using ChatGPT less. But that is my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you to Randy so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you, Tia. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Alyssa. Please turn your cameras on. We have a couple of questions here. Before we do, I was just thinking, I may have to change some of the course next semester or next session, because the discussion around copyright law versus what I think is dirty money. Like, what's more important now? You know, when copyright law was originally drafted, it was to, you know, protect the rights, and now we're in a world so much where it's the money first. You know, I would love to throw that kind of conversation into the discussion in the next class. So feel free to join the next class if you'd like to be a part of that conversation. We do have a few questions already have come through. The first one is for Liz. Liz, your topic is timely on many levels. Your model would very well, in most cases, your model would very well would probably work very well in most cases. Wondering how it can be adapted for a more fundamental person with a very clear point of view. How would you approach someone who identifies as fundamental? How can your model smooth the transition from fundamentalist to spiritual? Big question, but interested in your thoughts.
Thanks so much for whoever submitted the question. I would take this back to, in the suggested framework, going back to personal context. So on a one-on-one basis, whoever submitted this, I would love to have you reach out to me via the email that I put in my presentation. I would love to collaborate with anyone who has thoughts or ideas on the things and ideas that I presented to hear your point of view. And that is at the basis of this model and how I feel like it could work. So number one is personal context. And I guess in your saying or separation of fundamentalism versus spiritualism, I would need to understand more of personal context as to what being a fundamentalist person means for you. Again, going back to personal context. And I would probably suggest that fundamentalism is a belief system, which goes back to a subset of spirituality, how you choose to express your spirit and your soul. I would suggest that fundamentalism would fall under that subset of what spirituality is and what it encompasses. This expression of how you choose to live out your soul or spirit or whatever you may call it. So that's a start of what I would discuss. I'd love to share more with you and collaborate ideas. So please reach out to me on a personal basis so that we can understand each other's personal context and go from there. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Liz. This next question is for Tia. Tia, great presentation. In your opinion, how can publishers balance the ethical use of AI with the need for commercial success and competitiveness in the industry?
That's a really good question. I think one of the best ways to probably balance that is to set limits on what you can and cannot use ChatGPT for. So I know that ChatGPT, you can have a plan for ChatGPT. You can now pay to use ChatGPT. You can also use it for free. It does have some limitations, but I would probably say that within an organization, within a company, within an association, you have to set limits on what you can and cannot use ChatGPT for. I can see hopefully in the future, ChatGPT can have different plans, which will then limit what you're allowed to use ChatGPT for. For example, I think it's okay personally to use ChatGPT to find resources. If you have this one resource that you're like, oh my God, this is really good. This has been used so many times, and I need to find other resources that are like it, that have the same kind of mindset, or maybe competing ones, ones that have a different mindset and are thinking in a different way, so you can kind of look at both sides. I think it's okay to do that. And I think utilizing ChatGPT to find some resources and maybe do this like edits just like Grammarly does, I don't think those are inherently bad and unethical. So I think either having ChatGPT itself limit what you can and cannot use it for, or limit it within your organization. Unfortunately, because of how recently ChatGPT has come out, it is more kind of an honor system at this point. Or you could have one specific person using ChatGPT for those specific things, whether you hand it off to be like, okay, this is what I have, and then you hand it off to that person and they use ChatGPT and then hand it back. That seems pretty complicated to me. Does not seem very easy to flow with, but I would see if ChatGPT can limit it itself.
Good. There is another question also around ChatGPT, but I'll open up to the entire panel in case Liz or Alyssa also have feedback or want to weigh in on it. If we assume that everyone is using ChatGPT, how about we just ask them to disclose how they used it? This can provide us with some baseline data. How are they using this tool, assess their use, and then start to put some practical policies in place. So the person asking the question is asking for thoughts on this kind of approach.
Okay, I'll go. I think that baseline data, is probably the best that you could get. You have to have, if you aren't using the tool yourself, you have to either be talking to someone who is using the tool or watching someone who has been using the tool. Otherwise, I don't think you can get any kind of accurate data. In order for you to fully understand how ChatGPT is working or does work, I think giving that baseline data and then using it to put policies in place is probably the best idea, versus doing like an overarching policy. Because if you don't fully understand the policy that you're implementing, how can you stop other people from going against this policy, if that makes sense?
All right, I think that's all we have time for now. I do want to thank Alyssa, Liz, and Tia for their presentations. I did want to wrap it up really quick to say that in this class and in their projects, I really challenged the students to dig deep and focus their passion to their project. And I think you've seen it reflected here. A lot of their personal values and thoughts were kind of reflected in their projects and in these presentations. And I want to commend them for this, both this panel and the earlier panel, and say that there is strength in vulnerability, because you find that you are not alone. And I'm really proud to see how these projects have developed and emerged. And I know that many of them, even though the project is reflective of an 8-week class, I know that their passion isn't going to stop at 8 weeks. I'm certain that they're going to continue on and explore these topics. So thank you all for your panel today. And I'll turn it back over to John and Pooja.